Thank you so much for joining us here today in beautiful Sarasota. We are so honored to have you here. I'm Christian Blavin. I'm the executive managing editor of IndieWire, and we're just so honored to be joined today by an Emmy-nominated actress, someone who's produced movies and TV shows seen by hundreds of millions of people, really. New York Times best-selling author, and someone I think who's been a part of our lives just like for so long. I mean, I was 8 years old when Touched by an Angel started, and literally every Sunday night...
I'm 100 years old. But
every Sunday night of my childhood practically was devoted to your show. So please welcome Roma Downey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christian. Should we move these? They're gorgeous flowers, but all I can see, I can't see you.
This is a good point. Yeah, we're looking at each other through the flowers.
Thank you. We appreciate the flowers, but there you go.
Yes, beautiful as they are. Well, hey, look at this. So you've got your beautiful new book here, Be an Angel. And this, tell us a little bit about what you hope people will take away from this book.
Yeah, well, this is my lockdown and COVID book. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming out today, and it's so great to see so many people here. Thank you to this beautiful cafe for hosting. Thank you to Mark and everybody at the Sarasota Film Festival, which brought me into town in the first place. And I have a few special friends here. I have Carol and Renee in the middle table, who are my friends from home. Our kids all went to school together, so it's so nice for me to have personal friends here. I'm in town, Chris, with a film, On a Wing and a Prayer, that's going to close the festival on Sunday, and it's a marvellous true story. I'm honoured to have my mighty director of the film here, Sean McNamara. Sean. When you get to see the film, you'll know what an extraordinary job he did. If you don't get to see the film as part of the festival, it starts screening on Amazon Prime starting next weekend, Easter weekend. And it is based on a true story. And I am very honoured to have at the lunch here two of the people from that story who were played by actors in the movie, but real-life hero, Carrie Sorensen. Wonderful to have you here. Ashley Erickson. They haven't yet seen the movie, so that's going to be like so trippy for them to see their story on the screen. But talk about heroic. I won't ruin the plot for you guys, but just wanted to shout out that they're here, and just grateful to be here. But so my book, Be an Angel, like all of you, we were all locked down and not doing so much during COVID, and I just had this nudge on my heart to write a book. I was doing a wee bit more social media than I normally would do, and I just kept being struck, particularly on the Twitter app, of how mean everybody is and was to each other. And I was thinking, there used to be a time where you and I could disagree on something, but that we could be gracious to each other in sharing a different opinion. And I was sort of meditating on that and upset about that. And I thought, well, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and write a book that really speaks to kindness and being kind to each other. So the title, of course, is evocative of my many years on Touched by an Angel. I'm so glad that as a little boy, Chris, you watched that show. I have so many people that share with me that they had an experience where they sat on the couch with their mums or their grandmothers, and that they got to watch and enjoy the show together. And it was such a privilege for me to be on that show. I'm a person of faith, so when that script turned up on my desk, I couldn't even believe they were going to make a show about angels. It was the era, if you remember, where women wore a lot of big shoulder pads. And TV shows always had women hating each other. I hate you and I hate you. And so I loved that I read a script that actually had two female leading characters who liked each other, and who happened to be undercover angels. But that year, like most of my thespian friends, was struggling to pay the rent. So it would be untruthful if I said I was hanging out for that angel script. I was hanging out for a job. I'd have been glad to play, a detective or a nurse or, just about anything really. I had rent to pay and bills to pay. But so I wrote this book really just to encourage us all to be nicer to each other.
Such a valuable thing for this moment. It's a very loud moment right now. So much, so much rancor, so much, people, being uncivil to one another. And, when I always think of you, as like being a person of such like calm and tranquility. How do you maintain that? How do you keep that calm center?
Well, I pray, I meditate, and I've learned to hit the pause button, I've heard the expression that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And if you can learn to move into that space as quickly as you can, because I think particularly if words can be so powerful, and words spoken in anger, as soon as they're leaving your mouth, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can see them, sometimes when you send a text and you see the words going, sometimes when you speak in anger, you just wish you hadn't said something, and yet you can't take it back. You can say you're sorry, but the damage sometimes is done. And so I just think in that space between the thing that has triggered you and by the time you respond to it, if you can filter that through a space for grace, and I just kind of try to pray it in. But I think I've never been I think I've always had a little bit of a calmer spirit. I also have the very good fortune to live near the ocean, and I do my best thinking down there. I always have like a little bit of blue. You can see here on the cover of my book. It's like, and you are also blessed to live in this community with the water right here. But to be able to go down and walk on the beach or to hear the water, I just think it's like a massage of your spirit, a massage of your brain. And I think the scale of the ocean sometimes helps to put into perspective the things that we just think are so big, the worries that are so big on a Monday, I know COVID was very real and very awful for many people, and I don't mean in any way to diminish the experience of that for people who lost lives, who lost their health. But for the rest of us that were blessed enough to not be impacted like that, there was such a gift in the slowing down, I think, the reminder of what's truly important in our lives, of family and of friendship and, of telling the people you love that you love them. All these simple things that we take for granted. But all of these things I just sort of was writing into this book. So I was just writing it as I was feeling it. I created it to be like a devotional that, but like my other books, it's a sort of, you could open it randomly at any page or chapter, and I would hope there would be something valuable. It's really, Chris, told in a very personal style. Like, I'm not a lofty writer. I still, when I hear you introduce me as a writer, I go, oh yeah, I am a writer, because it's, I just sort of write it as I speak, so it's more conversational, it's more anecdotal, I'm an Irish woman, as you know, and listen, we grew up in the rain. It probably rained through my entire childhood. And when I think back to growing up over there, it was all activities that we could do indoors. You don't see like this massive Irish Olympian team. They're all things. And what really got ignited around the fireplace was story. We are storytellers. That's what we do. That's what we like to do. Or singers, but there was always a story in the song or poetry. There was a story in the poems, you know, and you would people would arrive at your house, and you might always tell the same story. Chris, you could have been, the story with the red boots would be your story, and every time you'd be invited over, somebody would say, Chris, now tell the story about the red boots. And so everybody had their stories, and you had to, you know, and that was just how we were raised. So my book, when I first started writing, I'm not a great typer. I kind of fell between, I guess I was, I'm in my early 60s now, but I grew up literally writing with a pen, longhand, and when I type on my laptop, I use my two fingers, as you do when you don't know how to type. But it becomes a rather laborious act to try to write something. So I just get myself a little tape recorder, and I just tell a story. And then I have my assistant, who's a fabulous typer. She typed it up, and then I work from that that's sort of my process. But so it's written in a kind of lyrical, a conversational way. But I wanted to just be able to tell stories of things that had happened to me and lessons I had learned. Because remember, at the center of this book, it's not about me, it's about God. It's in how God continually shows up in my life, and I'm just so grateful to him. So that's really what I wanted to share.
That's beautiful. That's so lovely. Was the faith that you have now in your life something always a part of your life, even as a child?
Well, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and my father was a very devout Catholic. I have still got the knees to prove that we would, after our dinner, we would be made to kneel down on the linoleum to say the rosary. And my brother and I would be behind our dad, and we'd be eye-rolling and whatever kids do. And my father would go, I can see you, but, he hadn't looked around. And but our mother tragically died when I was just 10 years of age. And honestly, I don't know how I would have endured the loss of my beloved mother if it hadn't been for a faith and promise of heaven, of the comfort that I just got from church and from the community, because church, yes, it's a building, and yes, there's service, but church really is made up of us, the people, and without the kindness of our community to help us through that period of time. So that really, my faith, I'm sure over the years has deepened. The kinds of material that I have chosen to produce, and, some of it's been overtly faithful. For instance, the Bible series. I don't know if any of you saw that, but thank you. And at that time, when we set off for Morocco to prepare to film that particular series, a few friends of ours had suggested that that we really were foolish, my husband Mark and I, because no one was going to be interested in seeing the Bible on TV, and all the other reasons why we might look foolish. We would lose our, we'd lose our reputations. I don't know. We'd lose our investment in the show, etc. And when all was said and done, and the numbers were counted, over 100 million people tuned in to see that series. So I guess people are more interested in the stories of our Bible than at that time our industry would have had us believe. But and there were crazy stories down there too, Chris, in Morocco. Like, we had this man, and his job, imagine if this was your job, his job was to catch snakes and scorpions. And they had a call sheet. Sean knows the call sheet is like, don't go, it's the daily instruction for what's going to happen on a set. We're going to shoot these things are needed. And then it always said, if you have to go to the bathroom, do not go behind a rock, because of the snakes and the scorpions. And so, anyway, this guy, we were preparing to shoot the crucifixion sequences. And we had called in prayer from, everybody we knew, really, because obviously we're recreating a very pivotal scene in the life of Jesus. But also we had to put an actor on a cross. And, there were winds up. How are we going to get him up on the cross? How are we going to keep him on the cross? How long can we keep him on the cross? I mean, there were very practical concerns as a producer.
Just on-set safety issues.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And so I had just called. I'm a member of a few prayer chains. If anybody here is on a prayer chain, it's amazing. You could put a call out for prayer, and before you know it, it's like viral in your group, and there's like thousands of people are praying. So we were just praying that would go off safely. So the man with the snake bag usually has 2 or 3 snakes in his bag. The morning of the crucifixion, he had over 40 snakes that he cleared from the area that we were clearing to shoot the crucifixion. And the significance of that, I know you're all gasping because you don't believe it, but I was there and it really happened. That they cleared this, so this sort of clearing I imagined was like all those prayers that came in and cleared that area for us. Anyway, the scene went off very safely, and Diogo Morgado, who played Jesus for us in that series, was fantastic and did amazing work. But so yeah, they've been, but the heart to tell stories like that. That's obviously a story of faith, Chris, because it's our Bible. But our latest film, On a Wing and a Prayer, it's a story of hope. There's faith elements in it, but it's really a story of hope. And anyway, I just feel that was the call on my life to bring. I'm interested in stories that uplift, that inspire, that connect us each to the other, that remind us that we belong to each other, and so I've tried to thread elements of that through this book, Be an Angel.
So, growing up in Northern Ireland when you did, I mean, obviously there was some tumult there as well. The Troubles were really starting up at that point. And, how did it come upon you that you wanted to get into the arts? It wasn't performing initially. It wasn't being an actress that called you initially, right?
No, I thought I was going to be a painter. But honestly, I think I was just looking, I always imagined I had a soundtrack in my mind, and I think it was probably just because of there was a lot of violence in our neighborhood, and the army had moved in the late 60s, and I grew up on a street that had sandbag posts on the corner and, rifles popping through and Saracens and tanks that went up and down the street. And my mother, God have mercy on her, she had this little china cabinet where she kept her wedding china that we weren't allowed to look at, never mind touch, and it was behind a lock and key in a room that was called the good room, that was also behind a lock and key, and we were all crammed into the back room, and there were lots of us, but every now and then she would get the key from the door, and she'd open the door, and we'd be standing all looking in at the good room, and then she'd go to her glass cabinet, and she'd sort of almost like lovingly nurture these little cups and saucers. Anyway, one day this tank was a Saracen tank, which was too heavy for the little hill that we grew on, came down the hill, and the houses all rocked like an earthquake rock, everything shook. And we were all in the back kitchen, and we heard this almighty crash. And my poor mother, she, like wiping her hands on her apron, she went running down the hall, and she got the key frantically, and she opened the door, and she went in and she opened the little cabinet, and there, broken into a million pieces, were all these little cups and saucers that had never been used. That was the shame of it. She was saving them for ... saving it for. And I think that lesson, and then a year later, my mother was dead. And so for me, I get something new, I'm wearing it. I mean, I'm wearing it out of the shop. I get something, and it's like we get a bottle of wine. They go, put it in your cellar. I don't have a cellar. I'm drinking it. That's sort of trying to find the blessing in everything, right? Obviously I wish my mother were here today, but she'd love this. I wish she was here, but she's not, but she's my first book I called Box of Butterflies. And my mom has always, I felt, shown up as a butterfly. I wear a butterfly all the time. And because when my dad took me to her graveside, and she was the first Mother's Day after her passing, a little butterfly flew up from behind the gravestone. And my dad said, "Would you look, that's your mother's spirit right there." And my whole life, I mean, whether it's a tattoo on a waiter's wrist, a piece of jewelry, a thing on a side of a bus, I can't tell you. Now that I've mentioned it, you will see butterflies everywhere. But if you're looking for them, and if they're holding significance for you, because I think how else would spirit speak to you? But through friends, through symbols, through, anyway, it has been a great comfort to me. But yes, the Northern Irish experience, I thought I was going to be a painter. And because, we didn't have a cinema, it had been burnt down. And, in a situation where, where there's real life and death tension, art isn't high on the list, so we didn't have a theatre company. And I mention this only because there was nothing really for me to be inspired by or aspired to. Like, people like us didn't become actors, I mean, I would never have imagined. I liked being in the school play, but nobody ever said, "Hey, Roma, you want to go to Hollywood?" That was like a million miles away, and a life. I didn't even dream of that life. But I was, so I went to art school. I was quite good painting. And I love, I'm an artist. And I think that, it just shows up in different ways, right? Then I was an actor. Now I'm a writer. Now I'm a producer. But it's because I'm an artist. And I like to express myself and tell story. But I was doing a dissertation on the Dutch painter, you say Van Gogh? Van Gogh. We say Van Gogh, but right. Van Gogh, Vincent Van Gogh. And I don't know if you guys know much about his life, but he was this is probably before we knew anything about mental illness. I think it becomes apparent that Vincent Van Gogh suffered from mental illness. And if you actually even look at his artwork, you can see that his brushwork gets more and more frenetic and more sort of desperate, and the crows and the cornfields and anyway, he wrote this series of letters to his brother, who was also his sponsor. His brother was called Theo. And in one of these letters, and I'm going to paraphrase this terribly, but he said something that, that it was no longer enough. He said, "Theo, it's no longer enough for me to be the painter. I want to be the paint." And I thought, that's so cool. I thought, and I've been doing more and more with the theatre group at the art school I went to, and was really enjoying the performing arts. And I thought, I want to be the paint. I want to be a performer, is how I translated that. And so, I kind of finished. All dads want you to get a degree, right? Like, I've never done anything with my degree, but my father said, "You have to finish college and get your degree." And so I did, and then I immediately, entered the business of show.
So interesting. And you were doing theater in Dublin, and then an agent suggested that you moved to New York, right?
Yeah, well, I actually did a production of an old famous Irish classical play called The Playboy of the Western World. I played the feisty Pegeen Mike, and it was a great production, and they were putting it together to go to America. Did anybody want to go to America? And I was like, I want to go to America. And I remember I had an agent who, a tour like that is called the bus and truck tour. And, there could be sometimes, like if you were in a big musical or something like that, there could be a full bus, I'm imagining. So to have your agent negotiate 2 seats on the bus was, great. But now in my case, and my agent didn't fully realize, we were a very small company. So everybody, could have had 4 seats on the bus. So how to win friends and influence people? When we all got on the bus with these new cast members, like, "Oh, don't be sitting next to her. because she has 2 seats on the bus. And I was like, oh, guys, I'm so sorry. We came to America, and an agent approached me in New York and said, you know, if you thought you might move here, I would have work for you. I think we could get work for you. And, you know, remember that my mother and father now are both dead. And I say that only because I don't know that I would have willingly emigrated and left my mom and dad there. But they weren't there. So I thought, well, what's the worst thing can happen? I'm really very much bottom line. What's the worst thing can happen? And can I have a plan for the worst thing that can happen? Because if I can have a plan for that, then, you know, I'm solid. So in this case, if I didn't like America, well, America at this point was New York City. If I didn't like New York City, and I needed to go back to Ireland, I just needed the cost of a return ticket. Now, let's say it was $300. I can't remember what it was. And, you know, when I first got there, my first job was checking coats. I mean, $300 was not a huge amount of money, but when you don't have money, it was a lot of money. And I had a little wad of cash with an elastic around it that I kept under my mattress, and I wasn't touching it. That was my get out of jail free card. And thankfully, I never needed to buy that return ticket. And I have to say that America, Chris, has, you know, I'm an Irish girl at heart, but America has been so good to me. I wouldn't have gotten these opportunities anywhere else. I know that, and I'm so grateful. Grateful to America and grateful to be an American now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so fascinated about that time when you were checking coats. It was at a restaurant on the Upper West Side,
yeah,
right?
It was a really fancy restaurant. I think it used to be a bank. It had super high ceilings. It was called Memphis. And I mean, you couldn't have afforded to, I could never have afforded to eat there. And they would all arrive, you know, at the 7 o'clock hour. And then, you know, and then I'd sit and read, or I'd try on minks.
One of the perks of the job,
Yeah,
right?
we just stopped trying coats on. I know it's terrible, but there you go. I never took anything. I was just trying it on. And I read a lot. And one of the people, that very first celebrity I ever met was the talk show host Regis Philbin. Yeah.
Wow.
And he's Irish, yes. And here's exactly, he said something. He said, oh, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Ireland. And he said, oh, I'm Irish too. And I said, oh, are you? Excited, you know, that maybe I met a local. And he said, yeah, I'm from, I think he was from Philadelphia, Clare Ann. And I said, oh, so it was my first introduction really to the Irish American, and how important their heritage are to all of us. And anyway, he, you know, I maybe got a coat, you know, it's just to give you my financial context for how much money I was making. And he left me $20, you know, that was like quite a markup. So I was appreciative of his generosity. And then this is a story that really could only happen in America. I don't know, let's say it was maybe 5 years later. I'm starring on a TV show, Touched by an Angel, and I'm invited back to New York. So I'm living now and filming in Utah, and I get invited back to New York to do the Regis and Kathy Lee show. And I'm interviewed by Regis. Well, I have to tell him the story, right? And so he started twitching. He's going, I'm not so sure about this. He said, did I stiff you? Did I stiff you? I said, I wouldn't come on your own show and tell a bad story about you. I said, you gave me a huge tip, and I've been forever grateful. But I thought, where else in the world could you be checking coats, you know, 1 week and starring on a TV show the next week? And I really feel that's, you know, that if you're willing to work hard and you get the breaks, you know, there's a lot of luck involved, but there's great opportunity in this country.
And even before Touched by an Angel, you played Jackie Kennedy.
That's right.
For a mini-series as well. That's so unique because she was still alive at that time.
Yeah, she was.
How did you go about preparing?
Yeah, there wasn't that much of Jackie Kennedy on video to really to learn her mannerisms or how she spoke. She had a very interesting voice. She did a tour of the White House that I was able to watch, and there was one other little clip that I kept discovering while I was researching. I think President Kennedy had just gotten the nomination, and they were asking her how she felt. Mrs. Kennedy, how do you feel? And she said, I feel fabulous. And they said, Mrs. Kennedy, can you speak up? And she said, I am speaking up. And I thought, well, I can't do the whole thing in a whisper, But for me, the scariest thing for me was that, I'm Irish. Now, that was in 1991, so, it's a few years ago. And in the interim years, my Irish accent has softened. But back then, I couldn't have understood myself. My accent was so thick. So they hired this man, and they nicknamed him the Brogue Basher. And he was there, and anytime I said anything that sounded, and it was like, don't call home. You must have been speaking to your family, because my accent would come on thick and strong. But the other funny story from that Jackie series, Chris, is I didn't know how to drive. I mean, my husband would say I still don't know how to drive, but I didn't know how to drive. I grew up in Ireland. We didn't have a car, and then I was in university in London, and then I moved to New York. So it wasn't like car-friendly places. So I'm shooting the series in Virginia, and then we went down to the Virgin Islands for the Greek episodes. But the script came in. It says Jackie drives up to the office, and so I said to the AD, "Come here. I just thought I should tell you that I actually don't know how to drive." And the guy looked at me like I had four heads, and he said, something like, we get a car for graduation. I said, well, I got a Parker pen for graduation. I don't know about you, but I don't know how to drive. So they found the smallest man in the world, I kid you not, because it was like a convertible, like an old American car, which was stick shift. I mean, I couldn't have driven that. Even now, I couldn't drive a stick shift. But the guy is curled up on the floor of the car, and he looks up and he said, I hope you can steer. and so with the two of us, I'm steering, the camera's over here where your camera is, and I drive up to the curb, and then I open the door, and he's still hiding down here, and I have a little briefcase. I'm taking JFK his lunch in the office, and it's just a delight for me to know that in that scene there was a little man curled up on the floor of the car, which is crazy. And then the other crazy, which has nothing to do with my book, but it's just a good story. And remember, the Irish like to tell stories. So I get this job in New Zealand. Do you want to go to New Zealand? I was like, gosh, yeah, I'd love to go to New Zealand. Well, you'd be playing the Queen of the Amazons. And I said, no, they must have made a mistake because I'm only 5'4". And they said, no, they want you to go to New Zealand to play the Queen of the Amazons. This is the lesson in this story is don't take a job just because you want to go to New Zealand. So I'm down in New Zealand and I'm wearing a leather armour. Honestly, please do not Google pictures of me in my leather armour. And they had this man who was, he must have been 10 foot tall, was my stunt double. And so he did like a triple backflip. And then I jumped into frame, and they put like just a hint of perspiration on my left cheekbone, and I had to like growl at Hercules. And but anyway, it was just the joys of a career, the many things. I'm grateful for all of it. The people jeep jumping over waterfalls, pretending to be me. The people curled up on the floor of cars, making me look good that I can drive a car. The Sean McNamara's of the world that you can bring a script to and an idea, and they bring it to life on the screen in miraculous ways. So it's a life that's been littered with love and many friends, and, we're in a collaborative arts. This is the only thing. There's nothing... It's not lonely, but it's a solitary thing to write a book. You know, the rest of my experiences, I have really enjoyed just the collaboration with wonderful people.
You've had so many amazing experiences and such an incredible career. I'm sure some people here have some questions for you. Anybody have any questions for Roma?
Any brave people? Oh, there we go.
They're at the bar. Go ahead. You have to speak up.
Were you on CBS or ABC? Which channel was that?
I was for the Jackie miniseries was NBC, CBS. Yeah.
Do you think you could get that show on CBS today?
I don't think so. No, I don't think. I really don't. I think I could get something like it maybe somewhere else, but I don't know that. I think TV has changed. You know, the face of TV has changed. I keep getting asked if we would do a redo of it, but unfortunately, my former co-stars, my beloved Della Reese and John Dye, who played the Angel of Death. We always loved that his last name was Dye. They both passed away, which is a shame. So it would be a one-woman reboot, but I don't think so. What do you think? Do you think a show like that would work on network today?
Well, I think they need it.
Yeah, I think people are hungry for hope. That's for sure. You know, and I think when you turn the news on, we're reminded of how, you know, many crazy things are going on out there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people like me who grew up with Touched by an Angel, I mean, would certainly be interested in, a revival today, see where, what Monica's doing in 2023.
Maybe she finally learned something, right? It was always the device in the show that Della got to be Della's test was the all-knowing, wise, and, 10 seasons later, Monica's still going, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. I think we have a question right here.
Thank you. I'm an emergency manager, and to calm my mind at night, I still watch a show. I record it, watch it, and what I'm always struck by is it seems, and I feel like you are authentic to that role, and I feel like the relationships that you have with Della and John Dye were real, and I feel like that comes out to us. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, so accurate. I think the love and respect that we had for each other off screen was certainly reflected in the roles on screen. I mean, we were on, Della and I too were very unlikely casting. She was this, formidable, outspoken singer from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm a quite gentle-spoken wee Irish woman. I don't know that you would have put us together. I always think that was the Holy Spirit cast that show. But she was just a remarkable person. And, when we were filming together, tragically, her only daughter died. Dumpsy died. And about halfway through, I think, the Touched by an Angel run of almost 10 years. And she took me in her arms not long after, and she said, baby, I always knew that God brought me into your life because you needed a mother. I just didn't realize that he brought you into my life because I was going to need a baby girl. She said, will you be my daughter? I said, yes. And she said, then I am your mama. And she was my mom. And I had the privilege of knowing her and being with her right at the end of her life. So she's an extraordinary lady.
Oh, question right here.
How difficult was it for you to keep your Christian faith in Hollywood?
Oh, how difficult was it for you to keep your Christian faith in Hollywood?
I mean, not difficult at all for me. But even with CBS, is that me? Am I giving myself some feedback here? I remember going to CBS, and they had a giant poster of myself and Della Reese over the reception desk, so right at the entryway. As well, they should have. It was the #1 show on the network with an audience of over 25 million people tuning in every week for a message of God's love. And I remember meeting in the hallways a very high-ranking CBS executive who, in a whispered voice, said, I caught an episode of the show last week and it was very good. And I said, thank you, but why are we whispering? And so I think there was, even though it was successful in clearly making them a bucket load of money, there was the spiritual element of it, the faith element of it wasn't cool. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of dinner parties I haven't been invited to. You know, a lot of things that I have been excluded from, I feel certain, but not to be deterred, you know. I read a quote lately of saying, you know, to remember whose daughter you are and then straighten your crown, you know. And so I've just felt that. And I think that people, you know, have been, for the most part, respectful of that. But so, you know, consequently, it's why I run this division called Lightworkers. We're committed to telling stories of hope and inspiring content. And I've devoted my life to being a storyteller and to glorify God with my work.
Praise God.
What do you think of the future of Christian films, and what kind of movies do you like to watch?
Well, I was very encouraged lately by, I don't know if you guys got to see a movie called Jesus Revolution. So it's just out. It's currently in, I think, in screens, and it has done very, very well. So I was just encouraged by that because, you know, when I go into meetings to try to raise money to make content, more content like the content I'm making, part of my pitch usually is, you know, we're an underserved audience. You know, we're hungry for these stories. But if we or other filmmakers are making these stories and nobody shows up, it kind of, you know, puts a button on that argument, you know. So I was just glad to see that film performed very well. And, you know, we just keep, you know, I mean, I certainly going to just keep chipping away at it. And, you know, our best hope is as new filmmakers, new, you know, young people come through, you know, that we just, you know, but I think we, the audience, if this is what we want, we need to be noisier, you know. We need to make our preferences known and shown and speak out.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, my name is Lily. I'd like to see you here. And what could you advise an actress who is not American girl and who would like to continue your career, acting career here in the U.S. Because you know it, you had this experience.
That's a good question. Yeah, she asked, what advice would you give to a young actress who's not American but trying to have a career here in America?
Gosh, well, you know, as I said to my own daughter, she was considering and did consider stepping into a career in acting. I was like, don't do it. But assuming you've already considered that option, is, you know, work hard at your skill, you know, get in class, perhaps work on your accent so that you have a little bit more versatility, or that, you know, that you can be well understood, would be a practical thing. And then just to stay ready, you know, that William Shakespeare said, the readiness is all. So in my experience, when opportunity knocks at your door, if you're fortunate enough and opportunity chooses your door to knock on, it can't find you napping, you know, or it can't find you saying, oh, well, I'm not ready, or, you know, I'm busy, or, you know, the readiness is all. So whatever that means for you, keeping yourself and keeping your mind and your spirit and your positive energy, because the life of an actor, the reason I was trying to discourage my daughter is because there's just so much rejection in it. And if you consider in any normal person's life, maybe they're rejected, I don't know, let's say a dozen times, and that would be an exaggeration. Maybe you're unlucky in love a few times. Maybe you've lost a few jobs, you know. But, you know, that might be the size of it. An actor's experience could be rejection 5 times a week. And each time you go read for a job or you audition for a job, you can't help but imagine you're going to get that job. You know, I've already spent the money in my mind that I haven't even gotten the job yet. I'm imagining what I'm going to do. And so then when they say, no, we don't want you, it can be so painful. And you have to remember that it's what you do. It's not who you are. Don't be defined by what you do. So if you can kind of get your head space, your emotional space, stay strong, and then just keep yourself ready. And good luck to you.
Well, that is such a great note to end on. On a Wing and a Prayer screens tomorrow at the Sarasota Opera House as the closing night film of the festival. So, Roma, thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. God bless.